we're going back to the height of the last ice age, the last glacial maximum. This is a world covered in ice, a frozen wasteland where continents are buried under miles of solid ice. It's hard to imagine that this really happened because it sounds absolutely insane. But if we go back 20,000 years ago, this is what our world looked like. Here is what would happen if the climate changed overnight and every single place on Earth got at least 1 meter of snow dumped on it. The snow would pile up and eventually turn into ice. That's what happened during the Ice Age, but over a period of thousands of years. All of this extra water came from the oceans, which were around 400 feet or 125 meters lower than they are today. The sun shone less brightly, and the earth itself was slightly cooler. Woolly mammoths roamed across the frozen landscape, using their tusks to dig through the snow and find food. But they weren't the only animals that adapted to the cold. These conditions made it possible for ice to spread across much of the northern hemisphere. And yet, life still found a way to survive. In fact, it was the movement of animals that helped humans survive the Ice Age. They used animal skins to make clothing and shelter, and they hunted large animals for food. They also developed new tools and weapons made from stone and bone that were better suited to the icy conditions. One factor was the tilt of the Earth's axis. During the Ice Age, there was less carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than there is today. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, which means it helps to trap heat in the Earth's atmosphere. While the vast majority of the Earth was covered in ice, there were still some areas where liquid water could be found. For example, the ice sheets that covered North America and Eurasia left behind pockets of meltwater in the low-lying areas. The tilt of the planet's axis, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere which you have been able to survive during the Ice Age. Let us know in the comments below. And the ocean currents all played a role in keeping some parts of the planet warm enough for liquid water to exist. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. This allowed some animals and plants to survive the Ice Age and eventually thrive once the climate began to warm. This meltwater formed lakes and rivers that provided a habitat for plants and animals. Additionally, the ocean currents that circulated around the globe brought warm water from the equator to the poles, keeping some parts of the planet from freezing solid. Less carbon dioxide means less heat is trapped and the planet is colder. However, even with less carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, there was still enough to prevent the entire planet from freezing. The Earth is tilted on its axis at about 23.5 degrees, which causes different parts of the planet to receive varying amounts of sunlight. Ocean currents are driven by winds, which cause surface currents that circulate around the globe. These currents help to distribute heat from the equator to the poles. Even during the Ice Age, ocean currents were able to keep some parts of the planet warm enough for liquid water to exist. This means that even during the Ice Age, the Earth's equator received enough sunlight to keep some parts of the planet warm enough for liquid water to exist. As animals migrated, they left behind the bones of their prey, providing a new source of food for humans. This made it easier for them to survive the harsh conditions and continue hunting. If we took all of that water and put it back into the ocean, global sea levels would rise by over 100 meters, enough to flood many coastal cities. But during the Ice Age, the colder temperatures also had another effect on our planet. Plants and trees froze. Forests died. Animals went extinct. For example, in South America, the Amazon rainforest remained largely intact despite the cold temperatures in other parts of the world. How did humans survive when most of the world was covered in ice? And why hasn't the Earth frozen completely? Today, we can learn from their example as we face the challenges of our own changing climate. After all, the northern hemisphere was covered in ice, and the average global temperature was much colder than it is today. So why didn't the entire planet freeze? We'll answer these questions and more as we explore what the Earth looked like at the height of the last Ice Age. The last glacial maximum. The humans themselves also had to change in order to survive. Humans developed a genetic mutation that allowed them to produce more body fat, which helped them stay warm in the cold weather. They also developed new social structures and behaviors that allowed them to live in groups and share resources. This made it possible for them to survive the harsh conditions of the Ice Age and eventually thrive. And humans had to learn to adapt to a world that was dramatically different from our own. The largest ice sheet is in Antarctica, covering 98% of the continent and reaching an astonishing 4,700 meters thick. But the ice sheet that once covered North America and Eurasia was almost as large. It stretched across the northernmost parts of the continents, covering millions of square kilometers. The ice was so thick that it extended down to about the 40th parallel, nearly reaching the Great Lakes in the United States and Beijing, China. So, how did life on Earth even exist at the height of the last ice age? These gaps allowed some humans to survive, although conditions were still very harsh. For example, at one site in central Canada, scientists found evidence of a small group of people living on an island surrounded by thick ice. They lived there for several hundred years, subsisting on a diet of fish and caribou. To hunt, they used spears tipped with stone points that were carefully crafted from local materials. Ice sheets stretched for hundreds of miles across the northern hemisphere. But there were massive gaps in the ice sheet, particularly in central Canada and northern Russia. These people lived during a time when the world was drastically different from our own. One of the most iconic images of the Ice Age is the woolly mammoth, a giant elephant-like creature with thick fur and long tusks. There were also woolly rhinoceroses, giant deer, and saber-toothed cats. Some animals hibernated for months at a time, while others migrated to warmer areas. Humans also learned to use the resources available to them during the Ice Age. But it wasn't just the animals and plants that adapted to the cold. Life during the Ice Age was not easy, but humans and other creatures found ways to adapt and survive. But you might be wondering how the Earth didn't freeze completely during the Ice Age. Thanks to a few factors that allowed liquid water to still exist on Earth during the Ice Age. Another factor was the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Finally, the ocean currents also played a role in keeping the Earth from freezing. All of these factors combined to create a planet that was mostly frozen, but not completely frozen. In fact, during the Ice Age, there were still some areas where temperatures were warm enough for rainforests to exist. Overall, the Earth was indeed mostly frozen during the Ice Age, but it wasn't completely frozen. Now that you know how the Earth managed to avoid freezing completely during the Ice Age, it's time to hear from you. What do you think? And don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this one.